Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Well, it's very, very good to be back here with you today after my month away. I came back to the Vihara here several days ago. And as we say in the monk's world, I entered the Vasa, as we say in English, the summer rains residence period for monks. It's a custom going back to the time of the Buddha that monks every summer, the rainy season, as it actually occurs in India and in that part of the world, will take up a residence and stay in one place to be together, to exchange news, to practice meditation, and to avoid too much wandering and begging and gathering of alms from the lay people. The ancient story is that the monks were wandering day and night through the rice fields, and when the rains came, they just kept on going and trampled down the rice. And it was a burden on the lay people who supported them. That's the story of how the summer rains residence began. But even now, 2,000 plus years later, we continue this tradition for many good reasons. It's a time for monks to regather themselves, to deepen their practice, and to reconnect with the place that they come from, in my case, with the community that I'm staying with now. So one reflection I'd like to share with you, which is a good one, I hope not just for you, but for me as I start off my range residence, has to do with one of the Buddha's teachings, one of the Buddha's deepest teachings. It's the teaching of anatta, not self. This is a teaching that doesn't really get talked about that much in Dhamma talks in the lay world. It's something, monk scholars will debate with each other a lot. But Dhamma talks for groups of lay people usually center on things that have to do with our social life and our practical life, our personal happiness as we go through our regular activities. But I think the Buddha's teaching of not self is very, very important for all Buddhists, all people who follow the Dhamma, because it's at the heart and the foundation of all of his teachings. So I asked Sunny to give this talk the title, Getting Over Ourselves. This is a expression in English you probably heard in the context maybe of somebody scolding you. Get over yourself. Will you people get over yourselves? Or you really need to get over yourself. It's not quite as often that we'll say it to ourselves like, I really need to get over myself. Although we might actually do it quite often in our own words now that I think about it. Maybe anytime we blame ourselves or get angry with ourselves for something we've done, we're saying, that's not what I want to be. I want to get rid of that self. I want to get rid of that way of being that I just screwed up by doing. Beating ourselves up over something that we do, that's a kind of self-making. That's what the Buddha's pointing us away from when he encouraged us to think about what self really is and is not. I made a little mistake just now when I was giving you the precepts. I swapped the commitment, the very important commitment that we all make to refrain from drinking and drugs, intoxicants that poison the mind. I swapped that for the maybe a little bit less important precept to not lie on a tall or luxurious mattress. They're not quite the same thing, are they? I could be blaming myself quite severely. I could be saying, oh, what a terrible thing. What kind of monk are you? And I did do that for just a second in my mind. And then I noticed, that's not really helping. And I moved on. That's a very small illustration of how we have a choice when we create a self for a moment. We have a choice with it. We can believe it. We can stay with it. We can build more selves out of it. We can exaggerate and extend it. As my teacher Ajahn Chah often said, we can make a problem out of it. He said that quite often. He said, you don't have to make a problem out of any experience, anything that happens to you. You wait, you watch, you notice it, you learn from it, and then you move on. That's the way of not self. So the parami, the virtue that we're talking about here, is nekkhamma. In English, that's renunciation, renouncing. It's another word for letting go. We renounce excessive pride. At the same time, we renounce excessive doubt. So far, I've been talking about how it applies to ourselves. And there's a lot to be reflected on in how it applies to ourselves. It's not just about mistakes that we make, but about really how we live our lives day to day and month to month and year to year. When we live our life without nekkhamma, without renunciation, we can become quite obsessed with our possessions, the things that we get, the things that we want. We can be quite obsessed with our status. Do we have the right job? Are we making enough money? Do we have the right partner in life, the right significant other in our life? Well, there's endless matters of status. And we can become caught up and obsessed even with our judgments. In the Pali, this is mana, conceit is how it's said in English. Our judgments of being superior to others, or inferior, worse than others. Are we good enough, or are we terrible? We can spend big chunks of our day lost in mana, conceit. Usually in English, the word conceit means feeling like you're better than others. But in the Dhamma, in thinking about self and not self, it's really about those judgments, believing in those judgments of better than, or worse than, or equal to. Always seeing yourself in terms of superior or inferior or equal. But when we live with nekkhamma, with renunciation, we don't obsess over our possessions or our status or our judgments. We take care of them. We take care of our business. We use the things that we have and need, and we find the appropriate jobs for ourselves, and we put energy into our position in the world, and our relationships. And we make the necessary judgments that we need to make in order to associate with the right people, to live skillfully, to have ongoing friendships and relationships. But we don't obsess over it. We don't believe that that's what we are at heart. We know that there's more to each of us than that, and also in a way far less. When we live with renunciation, when we live with nekama, life is a lot easier. It's a lot more free. The feelings of stress, the feelings of suffering that go with those kinds of obsessions, when they're less prominent, there's space in the heart for joy, for contentment and satisfaction with what we have and with things as they actually are. So it's not a sacrifice or a burden or a duty to live with renunciation, to live with nekama. It's something that we benefit every moment by practicing and pursuing. So we have a practical way of developing it as Buddhists. And in that way is the way of meditation. Actually, that way isn't just what we do here when we close our eyes and sit formally. It's something we can actually practice even in the middle of our everyday lives. We can, at any moment, pause, take a breath, and let go of any feelings of clinging or obsession that are coming up. That too is a practice of renunciation. I'll stop there. There's a few thoughts for you, but there's much more to reflect on and think about on the topic of getting over ourselves. Next time you say it, maybe say it with a little bit of a smile. If you're saying it to someone else, say it to yourself too. That'll help. That'll make it easier for that other person to hear and for yourself to practice. I offer those words for your reflection today.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Let's open.
As always. Just a question on meditation. I find it personally easier for me to clear my mind and meditate with my eyes open. Is that a no-no, or is there anything wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, that's okay. That's a good way to meditate. If, as you say, it helps you to settle, to clear your mind.
Yeah, I just find when I close my eyes, I find myself concentrating on keeping my eyes closed. Where if I have them open, I'm more able to just clear my mind.
That's okay. If you've gone far enough with your meditation that you can see clearly, yeah, this is actually better for me. I'm not being distracted by everything that I see. I'm being anchored in it. I'm being grounded by it. Yeah, that's fine. The tradition that I ordained in, the Ajahn Chah tradition, and many Buddhist traditions, encourage beginning meditators to meditate with their eyes closed. And that's sort of the default posture with the eyes closed for most Buddhist meditators. But all of the Buddhist traditions I'm familiar with have the aim of cultivating the capacity to meditate in any posture, in any state of mind, walking, sitting, standing, during a conversation with another person, while reading a book even. But for most people, that's harder. It's harder not to lose yourself. It's harder not to lose track of your mind. It's harder to do the central action of meditation, which is to watch the mind. But if it's easier for you, great. You can kind of skip ahead. People are different. Sure. Feel free if you have a question or if you have a comment to respond to something that Carl said, for example. It doesn't just have to be a question for me. Any other comments or questions?
I feel sleepy when I meditate. What I need to do?
It depends how sleepy. if you're just a little bit drowsy, then the standard advice is make the drowsiness part of your meditation. Notice, what is this feeling of drowsiness? Where is it? What are its sensations? What are the different components of drowsiness in my mind, in my body, in my fingertips? Notice the sensations of it and see how it changes over time. But that only works if you're a little bit drowsy. If you're very drowsy, you're going to start to nod off. If you're actually like falling asleep and waking up, you can do that for a little while, and maybe that will be enough rest to continue. But if you're very tired, just go take a nap. You're not getting enough sleep. So there's no fixed rule. What Ajahn Chah, my teacher, the founder of the order that I ordained in, said was what I just said. Try to meditate, try to keep meditating, but if you're too tired, go take a rest, and then try again after. Most of us nowadays, at least if you believe the newspapers, most people do not get enough sleep. We exhaust ourselves. So as soon as you actually sit down to meditate and close your eyes, your body says, oh, finally, I get to rest. And it just wants to go to sleep. So maybe that's a good lesson for you that, oh, I really need to get more sleep. But it's also true that when we're beginning meditators, sometimes the mind can feel a little bit threatened by meditation. There's a feeling of like, oh, nothing's happening here. What should I do? It's like kind of disorienting and scary. So it tries to escape by going to sleep. It's something to do. So it's a little hard to tell which is it sometimes. Does that make sense? Yeah. So just to summarize, if it's a little bit tired, stay with it. If you're very sleepy, just take a short nap. That's okay. And any other questions? Jenny?
But is there any particular contemplation that we can do to get over ourselves?
Particular what?
Contemplation when we do the meditation. What should we contemplate?
Well, I think really, I've talked before about the idea of interlocking dhammas. So if you find that phrase, getting over yourself, intriguing, you can contemplate that. But it's the same contemplation as we were just doing. We today, Sunny did a little variation, and he did the 4 contemplations, like I am of the nature to die, I am of the nature to age, I am of the nature to become sick, I am the inheritor of my karma. These are all contemplations on getting over yourself, on the true nature of things. So you can think about how those dhammas relate. That can be a really good contemplation. I really like, there's an idea I came across of contemplating a spiritual question. It means looking inside of your heart and on any time that you're going to sit down and meditate and thinking, what am I really concerned about now spiritually? What am I worrying about? Make a question out of that. Yeah. Make a question out of it. Most of the Buddhist teachings connect to one another. Getting over yourself is just a phrase that I thought connected in an interesting way to anatta, to not self. But that also connects to nekama. These are, I think, wholesome contemplations. So it can be a traditional one, or it can be a question that you have in your own heart. And you just sit with it after you meditate for a while. Meditate in silence. And when the appropriate time comes, when your mind is peaceful and calm, you can bring up a question and just reflect on it. I don't know if that helps. Maybe it would be, what do I need? How do I need to get over myself? There's one. Any other comments people have or questions? I wonder, Sunny. Sure.
I think your topic today is one of the hardest topic that as a lay people to understand. I mean, we can understand anicca is impermanence or dukkha, suffering, but anatta is just very hard to understand. It's like it's non-self.
Yeah.
Or it's something that you cannot comprehend with your regular mind persons. What will be the end game by understanding the non-self itself? I mean, is it like something that I know that this is not my body, but it is my body somehow. Mm-hmm. But how do we differentiate that? I mean, how do explain it as
How do you-
well.
Yeah, because like when we talk about dukkha and anicca, we put ourselves as an observer. Like dukkha, okay, that's dukkha. Anicca, okay, anicca, nothing lasts forever. Everything's gonna be eventually changed and gradually vanish. But we put ourselves as an observer. It means there will still be I observe I. So how we understand the concept that there's no I, because I'm the one who observing things, and if there's no I who observes, so
So,
where am I? Where I? So it's just like it's
Mind-boggling.
mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's like the concept of this non-self itself. It's kind of like it's really kind of hard to grasp for me. I don't know for others, but I mean like it's kind of like I try really hard to understand it, but it's kind of like it's not there yet. I don't know what is the key to unlock it, like this non-self. Because like I feel myself, so how I know there's non-self. You know what I mean?
I do. And I think there's a little bit of a paradox in thinking about it. I feel like I've unlocked it, and here's another paradox. I feel like I've unlocked it, but I don't think I understand it any better than you. So there's a little paradox there. My impression, I've studied the suttas pretty carefully in the commentarial tradition. I think that a lot of the confusion comes because there's actually more than one meaning. If you look at different contexts where Buddhist teachers, Buddhist texts, Buddhist culture talks about anatta, it has different meanings in different places. For example, when you talk about, well, I have a point of view, right? Yeah, of course, everybody has a point of view. And in everyday language, we can call that self. So it doesn't really make sense to say that that's what not self means. If you look in many of the suttas of like the Majjhima Nikaya in the Pali Canon, you see that actually in many places, the meaning doesn't really have to do with that. With not self, as you just said, it's actually maybe a better translation is not anatta, no self, it's anatta, no soul, no permanent, divine, eternal soul that goes back to Brahma after death, that joins with the cosmic soul. So many scholars say that, actually, better translation is no soul. Nothing to do with having a momentary awareness or not. Of course we have momentary awareness. But it doesn't always mean no soul. Sometimes it's very psychological. It's about how we become, well, as I was just talking about, hung up on ourselves. We become egotistical. Like, I am the greatest person. Well, sure, you have a point of view, but are you really the greatest person in the world? That egotism is a kind of self. It's a wrong view. But in my view, it goes too far to say that you don't even have a perspective. It's more saying that your perspective doesn't really have being the greatest as its true essential characteristic. So we're talking about two different things. So in a way, we could translate anatta in that sense as like no ego or no egotism. There's other meanings too. There's a kind of philosophical meaning having to do with no fixed essence. So you call this a book, but is it really in any ultimate essential way a book? Or is it, a collection of chips of wood baked into a white flat surface with some black ink on it? Sure, right now it's a book, but it's not in a fixed, permanent, eternal way a book. That's just a kind of temporary property of all these elements coming together. So that's another meaning of no self, is that things have no essence. So in different contexts, different meanings are intended, but they can't all be there together at the same time. We do have a perspective, and the word we use for that in English is self. I say myself, and you know exactly what I mean, and that's real, that's true. But it bears reflecting that the way that we sometimes misconstrue it causes us to suffer. Like hoping and praying and believing that we have some ultimate soul that's going to live in heaven later. Well, that's actually a source of suffering if we cling to it too tightly. Same with the other meanings, believing that I am the greatest or, oh, I'm the worst. Why do I keep screwing up like that? Holding on tightly to those ideas of self, that causes us to suffer. So I guess that's the long answer. The short answer is that, well, it's confusing because we're talking about more than one thing. And often ideas become sources of debate and confusion because they're not very clearly defined. So I think it helps to reflect on it and define all the different things that it's used to mean. And then it becomes less confusing. I don't know, I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Can I just,
Sure.
it's kind of like the difference between, and I think very few people that I know understand the difference between egotism and egoism.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to just sum up what that is for us?
I'm sorry?
Do you want to just sum that up for?
No, well, basically, an egotist thinks that I am the best.
Mm-hmm.
An egoist doesn't really, an egotist really needs the approval of others to prove that he is the best. An egoist doesn't need that approval. He understands, not necessarily that he's the best, but he really just doesn't need the approval of others to prove his wisdom.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
But then to follow up your explanation about the anatta and non-soul, okay. So if there's no soul, what is being rebirthed?
Oh, this is an ancient
Yeah.
debate. You can actually find this question in the suttas.
This conversation is going to take a long time and another discussion stuff. I have a lot of questions in my mind too, but I'm going to I'm going to take a long time.
Well,
Probably next time.
great. I'm glad to see that
Yeah.
people are interested in it.
It's like probably now, for me, the thing that I have to learn right now too. I mean, we know the concept of anicca and dukkha, but we don't really know when it comes how we deal about it. So it's just we have to practice every day from the smallest thing to practice how we accept and our respond to anicca and dukkha when it happens to us or surround us. Maybe that small step to understand the concept. Because we know the theory, anicca, nothing lasts forever. But to really understand it, really grasp it, it's when it happens to us. It's happened to not even surround us. Surround us, we just observe. But
Yeah.
when it's happened to us, then we really know, oh, this is anicca or this is dukkha.
Yeah.
And how we handle that. I think right now that's what should I learn right now? Because if I think about, because I don't really, the anatta itself, it means okay, so I'm the observer, so I don't understand why there's no me. That's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for now, probably just really understand the concept anicca, not just a theory, but really, understand it, really knows it. So,
Yeah.
so every day learning that.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. I guess if you think about that, the point that I was making about there's more than one meaning, take it one meaning at a time. So if you can really understand one of those meanings at a time, you can see how they relate to each other.
Elementary school, maybe I don't understand yet the thing that they teach in high school yet. So probably just little by little, then I understand gradually. Start from the small stuff, okay, dukkha, anicca, and then probably by practicing later on, probably I will understand the concept itself. Really, the theory is different when you really understand it. When you're oh, then you really, really understand it.
Yeah. Or when you see that, oh, actually, it's not the problem that I thought it was. It's not what I thought. It's not the kind of the answer shows me that my question was a little bit wrong.
It's like, like we live day by day, we watching, we observing like anicca and dukkha. It seems like even our parents, they're not real Buddhists, but even maybe different religion, but they saw anicca and dukkha every single
Sure.
day in their life, and everybody knows, oh, I'm gonna get old eventually. They just accept it. That's the way it is. But the concept itself, like the understanding, the enlightenment itself, to really know what it is, it needs time. I think like it needs practice, and it needs a lot of observations. I think, right?
I think so too. Yeah. Yeah. And to come back briefly to Sunny's question about kamma, I think that's a nice. The fact that you can ask that question shows you're seeing how the dhammas interlock. Like when we think about kamma, we are thinking about anatta, and seeing that there's some discrepancy, like how do I put those two together, it shows that we still have room to grow, room to learn. Maybe, yeah, it is a longer conversation. Maybe I can even think about it, for next week's Dhamma talk. But the one comment that I'll make right now about how anatta relates to that question of kamma, like what goes on from life to life, is that, as I understand it, whatever it is that goes on from life to life, it's not self. It's not some essential you. So whether you believe that something goes on from life to life or not, if you followed the Buddhist teaching, you're not going to identify with it. You're not going to think that whatever it is me. It's just in the same way that you as a child and you as a middle-aged person and you as an adult really aren't exactly the same person. That thing that goes from life to life is also changing in just the same way. So anatta applies in either case, however you think about kamma. Just a thought, a reflection to keep in mind. So the mechanics of how something goes on, how can something go on if there's no soul or self, that's worth thinking about, but attaching to it, secretly in the back of your mind believing, oh, that's who I really am, that means you have further to go with reflecting on anatta.
But the karma that you did when you were a child still being carried over when you're middle aged and then
Exactly.
when you're
Yeah,
done.
exactly. Yeah.
So the karma doesn't.
But is that you? Is that your essential self?
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's very hard to grasp because
It's really hard
maybe
to
it's
grasp,
not self, but
Yeah.
you're still connected with your past karma.
Yeah. Maybe you've asked the question, okay, well, let's say the people in the monotheistic religions, Christianity or Judaism or Islam, what if they're right and there's like a heaven and you die and you go to heaven and you stay in heaven forever? That's there's just one life, and at the end of life, either you go to heaven or hell. Let's say heaven because it's more pleasant. You go to heaven and that's it for the rest of eternity. Have you ever wondered, like, okay, well, which me would it be? How old would I be in heaven? Would I be 10 years old? Would I be 30 years old? Or would I be 70 years old? Which one is the real me? Or are you some kind of average of those? If you think about it, it doesn't really make sense to say, well, one of those but not the others is really me. And yet they're kind of different from one another. How would it be to be in heaven? So I think that it's kind of the same with karma. Like, how can there be if whatever it is that goes from life to life, is that really yourself?
Same person, different entity, perhaps, or different.
Maybe so. Anyway, these are ideas to delight in, not to be depressed over. So I hope you'll reflect on them with patience for yourself.
Yeah,
Thank you,
yeah,
Bharat.
like I said, like